Tutorial! Hello drawers, how's it going? Today we're talking poses. How to pose your characters so they don't look like stiff, weird NPCs and don't have broken spines. Before watching this video, I highly suggest you watch the basic anatomy tutorial I made first, because you have to be good with basic anatomy before moving on to poses, not the other way around. I went over all the steps for drawing the body, the structure I use, shapes, guidelines, important tips, so I'm not going to touch on any of that in this video. This video is just about posing, so I highly suggest you go through that video first. And for this video, I have compiled a list of tips that I think will help you a lot with posing your characters. Everything I'm going to say is my personal opinion that you have the right to agree or disagree with. It is based on my experience and my style, and you might choose to do things differently, and that is fine. And if you end up finding this video enjoyable, then consider leaving a like because it really helps the channel and I very much appreciate it. Thank you. Tip number 1. Don't try to cheat it. Draw the body. It's pretty simple, but by that I mean that even if you're drawing a character in clothes, even in big baggy clothes, you still have to draw their body first. You don't have to draw out the muscles and details, but the overall structure and silhouette should always be there, because the body doesn't disappear when you put on a hoodie. It's still there underneath the hoodie. I just felt like that was important to start with, because I often see beginner artists who don't think about that and just draw the clothes, and it ends up looking really weird because like you can tell, you can like see right through it that the limbs proportions are way off, the body doesn't connect the way it should, and it all looks wobbly because they didn't actually build the body before drawing the clothes. Oftentimes it can be a character wearing a skirt and the knees being drawn either way too high or way too low, because the artist didn't think about where those legs actually grow from, because they don't grow from the skirt, they grow from the pelvis. So you have to actually build the body and the pelvis to know where those legs grow from and how long they should be. So hey, don't be lazy. Anatomy practice is always good, so use every chance you get to practice it and you will get better really fast. Okay, next, rapid fire 3 tips at once. Tip number 2. The sketch should take you a reasonably long time. Tip number 3. Don't zoom in when sketching out a pose. And tip number 4. Don't polish your sketch and let your hand move. Now let me quickly elaborate on these 3 tips and my overall sketching philosophy. Please spend enough time on your sketch. That is the base of your drawings. That is where you should figure out all the proportions, make sure everything looks even, and fix mistakes while they're easy to fix. Don't rush through it, otherwise you might have a lot of pain and regrets later. And please don't forget to flip your canvas from time to time, because that will help you avoid so many mistakes that you wouldn't otherwise see if you didn't flip the canvas. Next, let your sketch look like a sketch. If I had a dime for every comment about how messy my sketches are, oh man. Yes, they are messy, but that is for a reason. If you want your poses to look natural and dynamic, you should let your hand move in a natural, relaxed, dynamic way. Let it flow. Let your hand move however it wants to move. Use your entire arm, not just your fingers or your wrist. Your goal is to capture the character's movement, not the anatomical details. Save that for later. Focus on the big shapes and big silhouette, and the best way to sketch like that is to not zoom in. Please, while you're sketching, you don't need to do that at all. You need to see the big picture. Zoom out, and even better, squint your eyes so all you can see is the silhouette. Anytime my mom sees me drawing and squinting, every single time she goes, "Oh my god, why are you squinting? Can you not see? Are you losing your sight?" And I'm like, "No, I'm fine. I have perfect vision. It's just easier to draw like that." And just go wild, go crazy. So instead of drawing an oval like this, draw it like this. It's a sketch. Don't worry about it being clean. It's supposed to look like that. So I normally start very roughly marking how I want my character to be positioned on the canvas. Then I sketch out the big shapes, so the head, the chest, and the pelvis. You can add symmetry lines and other guidelines for better proportions. Again, I talked about all of that in detail in the anatomy tutorial. And just sketch. Use big movements, simple sticks for limbs, then start roughly adding the details. And when you end up with something like this, then you know how people look at the stars and see like constellations? That's the same way you should be looking at your sketch. You look at this mess, at this pile of yarn on your screen that only you alone can understand, and it only makes sense to you, and you have the silhouette of your character. But what you also have is options. Because instead of having only one outline for the shoulder or the hand or any part of your character, you have several different lines, and you can choose which one you want to follow, which one looks better. So I normally make these really thick, messy outlines, and then what I do is I take a hard eraser and I start carving out the shapes from the inside and from the outside, where I feel like it's needed, of course. And that is pretty much my sketching process. Next two tips are number 5, head, hips, and shoulders, and number 6, straights and curves. So basically, I always start with the shoulder line, the hip line, and the horizontal head line. For a more dynamic pose, these lines can tilt in different directions, like for example here. See, it's not a super epic action pose, but it still looks dynamic because look, her head is tilted at this angle, her shoulders are tilted at this angle, and her hips are tilted at this angle. They are not parallel to each other, and this is how her body leans. But when the character is leaning, it is also important to show that they are still standing firmly, to show that balance, to solidify their pose so they look confident, you know? And a great way to do that is to contrast every curve with a straight line. So here, the right side of her hip is a straight line because that is the leg that is holding her weight, while the left side is a curve. Next, here is the opposite. Here we have a straight line on the left, and on the right, it's a curve. Let's look at another drawing. Again, you can see the tilt of her head, the tilt of her shoulders, and the tilt of her hips. If these lines were all parallel to each other, the pose would most likely look super stiff. And again, we can see that here the straight line is contrasted with a curve, then here it's straight, here curve, and again straight and curve. Same here, head, shoulder, hips, boom, boom, boom. Here, head, shoulder, hips, boom, boom, boom. You don't need to draw a Spider-Man type pose for it to look dynamic. I almost always draw my characters just standing, but I want their standing to look relaxed and natural. And to achieve that, what I do is I always tilt their torso, either leaning back or leaning forward. It's never in a straight vertical line, it's always leaning. Even that alone makes the pose look a bit more fun. Tip number 7, always add hands. I know some of you probably trying to do the opposite, trying to avoid drawing hands at all costs, but if you just start giving your characters both hands that are performing different actions and in different poses, don't you dare copy and paste your hands, I'm watching you. I mean, you can, of course, like, that's not a crime, you can do that. Like, if you have some sort of deadline and you don't have the time to draw another hand, then sure, of course. But if you're drawing for yourself, then just use that opportunity to practice drawing another hand, and you will already get one step further, one step better at drawing hands. But yeah, adding hands in different poses and action already adds like 100 points to how alive and dynamic your pose looks. Even if the body is standing completely still, the hands will save the day. I also do have a hand tutorial, so if you need help figuring out the hands, watch it. I love drawing hands, I'm quite passionate about it. The biggest hand mistake that I've made and regret till this day is in this drawing, I drew both hands and they are both empty, and this just shouldn't have happened. This hand should not be there. 100% it should not be there. I don't know why it's there. One hand would be enough, but I got greedy and I deeply regret it. Tip number 8, don't be afraid to cover up some stuff. That is something I've been struggling with for a very long time in the past. I would draw the character, draw all the small details and accessories right away, and then I would be trying to pose the rest of the body, the hands, other big elements of like clothing in a way that would not cover up those details. I wanted everything to show. I wanted the entire body to show. I wanted all the accessories to show. I wanted the ears to show, the hands to show, all the elements of clothing to show. But that is not possible if you want to have a natural pose. That is possible if you are a concept artist who only needs to show the design and can draw a character T-posing. But when you're drawing a character illustration, you will have to make sacrifices. You cannot show everything. It's like those hyper conceptualize drawings of female characters when they somehow manage to show both boobs and butt in one drawing, which is interesting and usually a clear indicator of a broken spine. So always draw the pose first. Draw the pose the way it should be, the way that plays in with the angle and the composition. Don't think about the details at all. Those accessories don't add anything to the pose. If they get covered up, then so it be. Don't be sad about it, it's for the better. Don't let any details restrain your character's line of action. Your piece will look so much better that way, trust me. Tip number 9, perspective, angle, and expression. These are the things that add so much to the pose. First, I'll just say, and this applies to the tip about the hands as well, but you will just have to learn all those things to achieve good posing in your drawings. With some poses, you will not get away with the default 3/4 face. You'll have to turn the head, or draw a side profile, or a tough angle. Because I mean, dynamic posing is probably the last step in drawing characters. It's like a final boss where you have to combine everything you have learned so far. Your anatomy knowledge, perspective, proportions, composition, facial angles and expressions, drawing hands, drawing hair, drawing clothes, because all those elements play a part in making a dynamic pose. So you have to practice all these elements one by one, and each new element that you master will unlock more and more possibilities for your poses. And only after mastering all of them, you will be able to draw any pose you want. I know I definitely have not mastered all the elements at 100%. I'm not Avatar Aang. What do you want from me? I'd say I'm somewhere at the 70% mark, maybe even 60. I have a bunch of stuff I need to work on and improve for sure. So just make a list of all the elements you need to practice. You can rate, in your opinion, how good you are at each element. Give each one a rating from like 1 to 10 and just start with your weakest point. And just draw. You know how I learned to draw hands? I just drew hands. And I never really sat down and like drew 100 hands in a row. No, but I made sure to include both hands in every single character drawing that I made. All my characters had both hands, and I used references. I would take photos of my own hand in a pose I needed, and I would use that as a reference. I firmly believe that no tutorial, no class, no book is gonna help you as much as just drawing that thing from reference like 10 times. Seriously, like, theory won't get you far. It can help you come to a certain way of thinking and going about it, but in the end it all just boils down to the amount of hours of practice. That's the only thing that matters. You just have to draw consistently, a lot. Make sure that with every drawing you make, you add some sort of challenge. You don't have to challenge yourself on all elements at once, but adding like 2 or 3. For example, in this drawing, you draw a facial expression that you've never drawn before, a new hand pose, and because your character wears a dress, you find references and practice drawing clothing folds. And in your next drawing, you can focus more on practicing body anatomy because your character is wearing tight-fitting clothes, for example. This way you will keep constantly improving if you keep challenging yourself little by little every time. Tip number 10, composition. I cannot tell you the amount of times I've seen drawings where the drawing looks great, the pose looks great, but the way it has been positioned on the canvas makes me question my sanity because I don't understand how this could have happened and why such decision has been made. Do you need a tutorial on how to crop the canvas? I can make one right now. So you just go, see, this doesn't look right. Why is the character in the freaking corner? What's all of this for? So just crop the canvas. Just crop it so the character stands in the center of the frame. Especially if you don't have any detailed background, crop the background as much as possible. It would actually be better if you put your character like out of frame a bit, zoom in on them more, then do this and leave them standing in the void. And tip number 11, draw characters with personality. This is just kind of the thing I've noticed, but it is definitely way easier to pose a character, to think of a pose and to draw that pose when you know who that character is and the bare minimum like basic personality traits, or how the cool kids would say, vibes. That's why I mostly draw fan art, because those are characters with already fully formed and known personalities. I cannot explain it, but when you know that, the posing just comes so natural. You can almost feel that pose. You can feel how that character should stand and move. It basically comes down to shape language, just like with facial features, for example. You want to draw a character smiling, but what kind of smile should that be? Is it a shy smile with no teeth? Is it a sly, narrow smile? Or a wide smile with every tooth showing? wink, or a subtle smirk, or a sharp evil smile. Those are all such different personalities. And it's the same with body poses. We all move differently. Some bodies have very smooth shapes and movements, some are more bold and rigid. So I think personality is definitely something you should consider when drawing a pose. And that was pretty much it. If you enjoyed this video, then press like, subscribe. I have other tutorials like this on my channel. I have a hand tutorial, face tutorial, anatomy tutorial, rendering tutorial, or if you just want to look at the art that I make, then you can check me out on Instagram. And good night, good day, goodbye.